My name is Claire Hayworth, and I still remember the exact words my father said at the dinner table that night. She deserves it, Claire. You don't. 7 words? That was all it took to make 17 years of trying to earn their approval collapse into silence. We were both accepted into the same university, but my sister got the tuition. I got a loan application form and a pat on the back. Before I tell you what happened at graduation, what made my parents' faces turn ghostly pale in front of everyone, tell me this. Have you ever been told, quietly, cruelly, or even kindly, that you were less deserving, even after giving your very best? If so, stay with me. This isn't a revenge story. It's a reckoning. In the next few minutes, you'll see how I built a 6-figure business from a secondhand laptop in a moldy apartment. What happened when my sister knocked on my door in tears, asking me to save her from failing? And why, at our joint graduation, I was the one handed the microphone, not her. But to understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to go back to one of those family dinners, the kind where the food is warm, but the favoritism is colder than the salad. Because this isn't just about college. This is about what happens when the people who raised you don't recognize your value until the whole world does. Before I tell you what happened at graduation, tell me, have you ever been told someone else deserved more than you, no matter how hard you tried? Drop a comment. I read every single one. I can still see the mashed potatoes on my plate, the steam rising, the clink of cutlery, and then the silence. That silence before everything breaks. We've decided, my father said, folding his napkin like he was announcing a weather report. We're paying for Olivia's tuition. You'll have to figure yours out. No warning, no discussion, just a quiet verdict handed down like I was someone else's child. I'd worked for this. We both had. Same school, same grades, same acceptance letter, except I had a part-time job and a better GPA. But none of that mattered. She's always shown more promise, he added, not even meeting my eyes. And then came the final blow. She deserved it, Claire. You didn't. I felt it like a slap. Not loud, not violent, just final. It wasn't just about money. It was about being told I wasn't worth investing in, that my dreams were optional, disposable, that being capable, hardworking, and consistent meant nothing because I wasn't who they believed in. What do you do when the people who raised you draw a line between you and the child they chose? You either crumble, or you get up and walk across that line, alone. That night, I cried like I hadn't cried in years, but the next morning, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to fight for a seat at their table anymore. I was going to build my own. And it started with one phone call, to the only person who ever looked at me like I mattered. My grandmother picked up after the first ring. She didn't ask why I was calling. She just said, "Come home, Claire. Let's talk." And that's where everything began to change. Grandma didn't try to fix it. She didn't make excuses for them or tell me to understand their perspective. She just listened. And when I finally ran out of words, she said the one thing I didn't even know I needed to hear. You have nothing to prove to people who refuse to see you. That weekend at her little house by the lake became the quiet beginning of something bigger. I sat on the porch, watching the water ripple like time itself, and I made a decision. I was going to Westbridge University, not as someone's investment, but as my own. The next few weeks were a blur of scholarship applications, loan paperwork, and Craigslist ads for cheap furniture. I sold old clothes online, waited tables, took weekend shifts at a bookstore. Every dollar I earned felt like a statement. I may not be the chosen one, but I choose me. While my parents took Olivia shopping for dorm decor and designer bags, I packed my things into boxes I got from the back of a grocery store. She got champagne toasts. I got instant coffee and spreadsheets. And yet, there was something liberating about walking into my future knowing that every step forward was fully mine. No one held the door open for me, but I found the handle, and I turned it myself. The apartment I moved into wasn't much. Peeling paint, shared bathroom, paper-thin walls. But I had a mattress, a used laptop, and a dream bigger than anyone knew. And that would be enough, at least to start. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbor's alarm clock before mine went off. The shower barely worked. The kitchen was the size of a closet, and I shared it with 3 other girls I'd met through a housing forum. But for the first time in my life, every inch of space around me felt like mine. No one expected anything from me. No one hovered or doubted or compared me to someone better. It was just me, and the quiet hum of possibility. I laid out my textbooks on the floor, no desk yet, and mapped out a schedule so tight it made my head spin. 30 hours of work per week, a full load of business classes, and whatever time was left to study, sleep, or simply breathe. But I wasn't intimidated. I was awake. More awake than I'd ever felt under that quiet ceiling of family disappointment. Every night, while the others scrolled through social media or watched Netflix, I was budgeting grocery expenses on Excel. Every morning, while the dorms across town lit up with blow dryers and coffee makers their parents had paid for, I was walking 20 minutes to my cafe shift, watching the sun rise between city buildings and telling myself, "You're doing this, not because someone opened a door, but because you built one. From scraps, grit, and sheer refusal to give up. The apartment wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that space doesn't define success. Purpose does. And while my sister's life on campus looked like a highlight reel, mine was a grind. But it turns out, when no one's watching, that's when you start becoming someone they can't ignore. Olivia posted a photo on her first night at the dorm. Her roommate holding a flute of champagne, string lights glowing, everything perfectly curated. The caption read, "Cheers to new beginnings." Meanwhile, I sat cross-legged on my mattress, eating instant noodles out of a chipped bowl, finalizing my budget for the month. I couldn't afford both textbooks and fresh produce, so I chose textbooks and made peace with canned soup and black coffee. She had a view of the quad. I had a flickering ceiling light and a neighbor who played loud EDM at 2 a.m. But here's the thing. While she was navigating sorority mixers and student socials, I was learning how to stretch $20 across a week, how to calculate margins on small-scale budgets, how to manage exhaustion without letting my grades slip. And slowly, it began to show. In my intro to accounting class, I wasn't just memorizing formulas. I understood them, because I was living them. While other students fumbled through case studies, I applied the same logic to my own reality. Limited income, high stakes, zero room for error. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal midterm, my professor pulled me aside. "Claire," he said, "whatever you're doing, it's working. Your analysis was the sharpest I've seen all semester." That moment didn't come with applause or flowers, but it was the first time someone outside my little world saw what I was becoming, and that spark. It was enough to light the next idea, not just to survive college, but to build something that might just outgrow everything I'd been denied. On weekends, Olivia went to themed parties and brunches with her sorority sisters. Her Instagram was filled with group selfies, latte art, and girls' night out stories. I wasn't in any of them, not because I wasn't invited, but because I was working. Saturday mornings, I was on my second shift at the cafe. Saturday nights, I was editing resumes for classmates or building simple websites for local shops. It started as a favor. Then it became something more. One of my professors had mentioned a growing need among small businesses for digital support, basic admin tasks, customer emails, content scheduling. It wasn't glamorous, but it was an opportunity. So I made a logo, bought a cheap domain, and launched my first version of what would later become a full-service digital assistant agency. I didn't have funding or fancy branding, but I had one thing most startups didn't: real, relentless motivation. Every client I landed helped me pay rent. Every hour I worked was an hour I wasn't spiraling in self-doubt. Olivia was making memories. I was making invoices. And strangely, I didn't feel like I was missing out. Because for the first time, I wasn't just proving something to them. I was building something for me and my tiny side hustle. It was about to open doors no one in my family ever imagined. I didn't know it then, but that little website would lead me all the way to a graduation stage, with a microphone in my hand and a whole auditorium listening, including the ones who once dismissed me. The stadium buzzed with the energy of caps, gowns, and proud families waving from the stands. Olivia was seated 2 rows ahead of me, perfect curls, perfect smile, perfect seat next to our parents. They had front row tickets. I had my name on the program. Dean Hadley had pulled me aside weeks earlier. "We'd like you to represent the School of Business. Your story, your work, it's extraordinary." I'd nodded, steady on the outside, trembling on the inside. Now, as my name was called, I rose. Not just from my seat, but from every moment someone had tried to keep me small. Walking to the podium, I caught a glimpse of my parents. My father's brows furrowed. My mother's hands froze mid-clap. Olivia turned, wide-eyed, whispering something they couldn't answer. I took a breath and spoke not from notes, but from 4 years of grit. I came to this university with no safety net, no family funding, no dorm decorations, just a stubborn belief that I belonged here, whether or not anyone else believed it. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers, but I did speak the truth about resilience, about building something when no one hands you a blueprint, about being underestimated until the room has no choice but to listen. When I finished, the applause started slowly, then grew. Somewhere near the front row, my mother wiped her cheek. I'm still not sure if it was pride or regret, but either way, they saw me now. After the ceremony, they tried to catch up, with words, with smiles, with an offer that came 4 years too late. If you've ever dreamed of one day standing on your own stage, where the world finally hears your story, hit that like button and tell me below, what would you say if you had that microphone? After the ceremony, I found them near the fountain. My parents, standing beside Olivia, trying to look casual. Dad held a gift bag. Mom offered a tight smile. And Olivia? Well, she looked like she finally understood something words had never been able to explain. "We wanted to give you this," Dad said, handing me the bag. "A little something for your next chapter. Maybe for your new apartment." Inside was a check. Not huge, but enough for a deposit on a modest place. 4 years ago, it would have felt like salvation. Now, it felt small. Not in amount, but in meaning. "I appreciate the gesture," I said carefully, "but I've already secured my new apartment. My business covered it months ago." Silence. And then, Mom said what I hadn't expected, at least not out loud. "We didn't know how far you'd come, Claire." That was the point. They hadn't asked, hadn't wanted to see. until the world applauded and they realized they'd clapped for the wrong daughter all those years. Olivia broke the tension. She didn't just come far, Mom. She built the road. Then she turned to me, softer now. You didn't need them to believe in you, but I'm sorry they didn't. For once, I didn't feel the need to explain or soften the moment, because sometimes dignity looks like letting the silence do the talking. We took a photo together, me, Olivia, and Grandma, who stood proudly by my side. No forced smiles, no need to pretend. Just 3 women who knew exactly what it meant to become visible, on their own terms. The photo from that day now sits framed on my desk. Not the official graduation portrait, but the one taken in front of the business school. Me in my cap and gown, standing between Grandma and Olivia. No parents in sight. And for once, it didn't feel like something was missing, because the people who showed up in that photo were the ones who'd shown up when it mattered. In the weeks that followed, I started my job at the consulting firm that had offered me a spot after the business competition. My agency continued growing, run by students I once mentored, now thriving with their own clients. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was building. Not just a career, but a life I'd designed with intention, grit, and clarity. And when the university reached out to say they were naming a scholarship after me, the Claire Hayworth Resilience Fund, I didn't cry. I smiled. Because the girl who once couldn't afford books had now made it easier for the next Claire to believe she belonged. My parents eventually came around. They apologized. Awkwardly, sincerely, imperfectly. And I listened. But I didn't need the apology to move forward, because I'd already done that, with or without them. You see, the real win wasn't the speech, or the awards, or the job. The real win was no longer needing their permission to feel worthy, because I had finally learned their inability to see my value never meant it wasn't there. It just meant they were looking in the wrong direction. And I kept walking forward, exactly where I was always meant to be. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to rebuild your worth from the ground up, you're not alone. Subscribe to this channel for more journeys like Claire's, because sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be.